What is going on, everyone? It's your guy, Cole Jackson, back here on Road Graders, coming to you today with some very exciting news. Obviously, you've seen all the headlines, you've seen all the action on Twitter. The Baltimore Ravens have re-signed Ronnie Stanley to a 3-year deal worth $60 million. That's a $20 million AAV. I believe it was $44 million guaranteed. If you guys are looking forward to this breakdown of all the negotiations and what this means moving forward, hit that like button for me. Hit subscribe if you're new here. Drop a comment down below. Join in on the chat and let's talk this through because it is a big one for me. This is one of the first kind of stories I've followed from start to finish where I had a really good beat on it. So you can see here on February 26th, right around the combine, heard a lot of buzz around the Baltimore Ravens and Ronnie Stanley being very close on a deal. Now, the big question is, that was almost 2 weeks ago. So what the heck happened? So I'm going to kind of go through all the intel, what I had heard, what prompted me to kind of put the tweets out there. So obviously the combine is a major milestone in the offseason in the calendar. Big piece being everybody gets together in Indy, and that includes GMs, scouts, coaches, but also player agents, because all of these vets that have player agents like Ronnie Stanley, who used Kim Miala of Rock Nation Sports. Keep in mind, Kim Miala also is Saquon Barkley's agent. And so we'll kind of get into why that is important, because Saquon's deal came out in the middle of the week. And you have to wonder, was that part of the delay, attention towards Saquon's deal, then moving into Ronnie Stanley? So we'll kind of go through that as well. So let's go all the way back to the combine. So the big reason that I got a pretty good beat on these details is because not only had I heard from the Baltimore Ravens side that there was mutual interest, and I wouldn't say, that there was interest in keeping Ronnie, because I wouldn't say that's groundbreaking news. The Baltimore Ravens have told us Ronnie Stanley was a priority. I don't think they gave any indication. If you go to Eric's press conference, if you go to John Harbaugh's press conference, there was never an indication they didn't prioritize Ronnie. They have some of their speaking points that they'll use that kind of walk off that interest level. And there was none of that. So, I mean, that's not just that part, but I do have a contact that is close to Ronnie that had told me that and this is really the key for me, is that Ronnie wanted to be in Baltimore. And there was two specific reasons why, both of which make perfect sense. First off, there's a lot of trust between the Baltimore Ravens medical staff and Ronnie Stanley. Now, I know there was a lot of stuff around Steve Saunders and the training department and all that stuff. I get it. I think that's a separate issue. I'm not trying to excuse any of that. I'm not trying to ignore all of that. But when Ronnie Stanley was recovering, you got to keep in mind, in 2020, about a week after he signed that extension in 2020, the 4-year deal. It was a 5-year deal that became a 4-year deal with the restructure of the deal last year. When he fractured his ankle, he also suffered nerve damage. So as part of that, it was a very lengthy recovery and it required a cleanup surgery. He was going through a huge issue where he just wasn't comfortable planting on his foot. You saw him come back in that Raiders game in 2021 before Alejandro Villanueva. Let's not talk about that cat. Took over at left tackle. Didn't look comfortable. Didn't look like himself. And the Ravens were very supportive of Ronnie Stanley as he not only went through his physical recovery, but also the mental recovery. So there is a huge trust level between Ronnie and the Ravens in terms of the medical piece. The second piece being Ronnie Stanley gives a crap about his legacy. He wanted to play for one team, and he cares about things like getting into the Ring of Honor. That's something that he prioritizes. So those two specific details were really why I thought, there's a really good chance, because there's a mutual interest and there's specific reasons that Ronnie would choose the Ravens over other teams. Those are two competitive advantages that other teams just don't have. Obviously, they can have great medical staffs, but Ronnie wouldn't have that trust level with them. So that is why I thought that, I had a really good read on this. As the week went on, and this is where I think the Saquon Barkley contract comes into play, because if Kim Miala, his agent, is negotiating Saquon Barkley's deal, which came out Wednesday, that would be a little bit of a distraction point. I also think the Baltimore Ravens, we know how they operate. EDC, every dollar counts. They also had a price set. And I think what I tweeted this morning was yesterday's price ain't today's price. I think they could have locked this in last week and paid a little bit less. Question is how much less. We'll get into that in a minute. But I think they dragged their feet on it a little bit. I think they were trying to do that thing where they set the number and they try and get Ronnie to agree to that number. But the market for Ronnie Stanley, I mean, they say there's a legal and illegal tampering period. It's a bunch of BS. Like, the agents talk to teams. They'll be talking to teams about other stuff. Like, they can't officially contact. There would be investigations, but let's be real. We can't be naive. That tampering period, it gets broken all the time. So there was a market drumming up for Ronnie Stanley that two teams specifically entered this week. We know that the New England Patriots were going to be in the left tackle market, so that's not news. There was also some rumors about the Bears. I don't really think I'd never heard anything about that. The other team that was in there was the Commanders, again, a team that's looking for left tackle help. But the two teams that entered this week, one was the Kansas City Chiefs because they released Joe Thuney. The idea that they'd go out and try and sign Ronnie Stanley and use a backloaded deal to try and make the contract work while moving Kingsley Suamataia to left guard. That all makes sense. But then the other team that came in, and I haven't seen this reported anywhere, but I had heard, was the Green Bay Packers, which is kind of surprising because I think Rasheed Walker had played left tackle pretty well. So I was a little surprised by that. But that was the added market, was more teams coming in looking for left tackle help. I think that's where the market pushed up, because the number I had heard around Tuesday was a 3-year deal worth $55 million. Obviously, it landed at $60 million. We saw Jay-Z tweet out. Do I have that one here? Jeff basically confirming this. Ravens were hesitant to get to $20 million per year, but they did it 2 days before he would have started to field offers in a market that is expected to yield plenty of suitors. And then he went on to say rumors of 25 AAV. So that there was a rumor of a 4-year, $100 million deal from the New England Patriots. I don't have anything to confirm that. That's just something I kind of heard. And then Jeff kind of mentioned 25. So I think that is kind of where the ceiling was at if he hit the open market. But again, the Ravens getting a little bit of that inside track with the factors that the other teams wouldn't have. So I think they probably had this deal around the 52 to 55 million mark last week. They tried to play it out. Obviously, other teams got in the market, and it got up to 60 million over the 3 years for them to keep him. So that's really the contract details that are important. That's where the delay was. That's why I tweeted out this one, which is, someone asked me this morning, what's the update? And it's just yesterday's price ain't today's price. And that really was the holdup. They were trying to kind of drag their feet to try and get Ronnie to come down to what the Baltimore Ravens wanted. So that is kind of where we land on this. I'm just happy I was able to hit on one. It's a great feel-good moment for me, because obviously a lot of doubters out there, but this is just one of those things. March 5th, I was asked if anything's changed. The answer was no. I'm glad that this was able to. The thing is about getting source information and stuff like this is these negotiations can change at any point. Ronnie could have walked away from the table. Ravens could have walked away from a table. Doesn't mean that they weren't close last week. It's a dynamic thing. But, from my perspective, if I hear stuff, I'm not a reporter. I'm not trying to be a reporter. I'm just having fun out here doing this as a side gig. So, getting to share some of that information with you guys, we all get to get a little bit of an inside look at stuff happening. So the question is, what does this mean for the Baltimore Ravens? If you look at the cap situation, this is a chart that's put out by Brian McFarland from Russell Street Report. And what he does in here, it's the third box that's projected future expenses. This is a really important one, because right now, if you look at their cap situation, they have about 12 million in cap space. But when you factor in things that they know they are going to have to spend money on, things like their draft picks, things like their practice squad, things like elevations throughout the year, things like they always carry about 6 million for injury replacements. So you have to factor that in to your cap space, because they don't have 12 million to spend, because about 11 million or less than that is going to, or more than that, sorry, is going to be spent on these future expenses. So they actually have about negative 11. So now they've signed Ronnie on a 3-year deal. His cap hit is going to be somewhere between $6 and $10 million. So now they have negative 17 to negative 20 million in cap space. But in the bottom box there, where it says potential moves to create cap space, things like they could release Arthur Millette, they could extend Derrick Henry, they could restructure Lamar for $15 million. So there's a bunch of triggers that they can hit to create cap space, which they will do in the coming days. Coming weeks, but it's just to kind of show what that cap situation is, because they don't have a lot of money right now to make another addition to this team going into the draft. So this was kind of the big splash, was adding Ronnie Stanley at a pretty substantial contract. That's kind of your premium investment. And now you have your O-line looking like Stanley, Linderbaum, and Rosengarten as a locked-in left tackle, center, right tackle. I think this is a really great spot to be in if you're the Baltimore Ravens, because your building blocks are all one spot away from each other. So you have a solid top 15, top 10 left tackle, you have a top 5, top 3 center, and you have an ascending guy that I think by the end of next year will be in the top 10 for right tackles. So it's all about, and I added in the details here. So the building blocks are in place. The 3 things that those 3 have in common: plus athletes, good fit in zone blocking, and good profile for 5-man protection. So basically athletic guys that can get out in space. And I think that is absolutely a huge piece that you have to think about, because when you look at a guy like Daniel Faalele, I've been pretty hard on him in terms of what I think the Baltimore Ravens should do. There's always 2 different opinions. There's what I want to do, and there's what I think the Ravens will do. Those 2 things aren't always the same. I think the Baltimore Ravens should be upgrading that right guard spot, because he doesn't check those 3 boxes. He is a down blocking, power gap, Greg Roman type scheme fit at guard, and we're trying to run Todd Monken's zone scheme, which is athletic, getting guys out in space, and that is where Faalele struggles the most. So I would like to see a ton of competition. I want to see 3 offensive linemen brought in, a true tackle, a guy that's a true guard, and then a guy that is a tackle in college that could, come in and compete at guard, but could also be that kind of long-term tackle, also be depth for Ronnie Stanley. So someone like Donovan Jackson from Ohio State would be a perfect fit, because he could come in and compete at guard right away. But if Ronnie did go down, he could kick back out to left tackle, where he filled in for Josh Simmons this year. So that is really what I would like to see. 3 guys brought in, and it's just basically giving an honest competition. If Daniel Faalele wins the battle, cool. Give it an honest competition. Compare on the merits. Don't go with this whole rookies need to earn it BS that we've seen. That's why we didn't see Rosengarten until 6 weeks in. We had to go through McCary at right tackle. I think it's also why we didn't see Andrew Voorhees take over his spot once he got healthy, which sucked, because when we saw him get in week 17 against Cleveland, looked much improved, much higher ceiling from that player. And unfortunately, he didn't get a full season of, taking his learning lumps, getting better every game. He didn't get those learning opportunities that a guy like Rosengarten did. So now we don't really know what we have in Voorhees. We went through McCary, who we knew what we had, right? It was kind of a semi-high floor, not necessarily. Well, I mean, he played pretty bad in a lot of spots, so I don't even know how high that floor is, but you felt like you trusted him a little bit more than Voorhees, who might have had some uglier mistakes. So unfortunately, that's what we're looking at. I just want to see an open competition at the guard spots. You have your building blocks in your tackles and your center. Go out and bring in competition. Bring in young guys that are athletic, that can play in space, and that can 5-man protect. That is going to go a long way in making this offense more diverse, protecting Lamar Jackson, and moving the ball for Derrick Henry to stack on. And, I'd love to see Derrick Henry hit 2,000 yards next year. I think he absolutely can. I think the O-line needs to be more in position than of getting help to the running back, like what the Eagles do with Saquon Barkley. Now, we're not going to probably hit the Eagles level, but that should be the goal, right? It's to get there by the merits of your O-line, not just the merits of your running back. And that goes the same for pass protection. Lamar can make guys miss. I don't want to see him have to do it. He's a pocket passer. I want to see him stand tall in the pocket, go through his progressions, and deliver that ball. I don't want to see him have to do, 3 spin moves, a juke, and then throw across his body. It's fun, but it sucks when you're an O-line guy watching it. So that's what I have for you guys. If you guys enjoyed this breakdown, hit that like button for me. There's 86 of you in here. I want to see 86 likes on that video. Hit subscribe if you're new here, and thank you all for coming along for the ride. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. Peace out, everyone.